I am Alex, 33 years old, a software developer, an entrepreneur, but above all, a brother. There is only one reason I want to tell you this story, because sometimes the deepest betrayal doesn't come from the outside, but from those closest to you. I trusted my family, and that trust stabbed me in the back. Everything started 10 years ago in a garage in Palo Alto. Yes, it might sound cliche, but that was the reality. I sold a few pieces of jewelry left to me by my mother and managed to raise $50,000. With that money, I wrote the first lines of Nextech's code, sleepless at night, hopeful during the day. I lived and breathed the scent of coffee and code inside that garage. After years of effort, I owned a company in San Francisco generating $2 million in revenue per month with a team of 30. I thought I had made it, but I had forgotten one thing. To my family, I was always just their son. The real star was my sister, Sarah. Sarah, 4 years younger than me. She returned from Wharton with an MBA, a portfolio proving she had worked with major brands, and a vocabulary filled with words like vision and globalization. My mother told me bluntly, "If you don't make Sarah a partner in the company, you have no place in this family." My father was even clearer. "You are hardworking, but Sarah is a leader. She will take Nextech public." Still, I thought, maybe it could work. Maybe I could give my sister a chance. Maybe we could grow together. Maybe this family could stay united. But what I didn't realize was this: Sarah didn't want a chance. She wanted control. On her first day at work, she stepped into the office in her high heels, instantly drawing everyone's attention. Her words sparkled, her voice carried confidence. And within the first week, even my most trusted colleague, Jake, had sided with her. Slowly, I was pushed to the sidelines. My opinions were no longer sought in meetings. My office was transformed into her coaching room. And I, in the company I had built with my own hands, was gradually becoming a stranger. Do you think this story ends here? Number. This is where it truly begins. Because one day, when I lost the throne I had built with my own hands, I would tell you how I planned my revenge. But first, there's only one thing you need to understand. Betrayal doesn't just sharpen your heart, it sharpens your mind. One morning, when I walked into the company, a presentation was taking place in the glass-walled conference room. Sarah stood in front of the projector screen. The slide read, "The future of Nextech." The future. That word was what I had dedicated my years to. But my name wasn't mentioned anywhere in that presentation. In their future, there was no place for me. That day, our CFO, Michael, approached me. "Sarah wants to move you into a strategic advisory role," he said. "She'll be making the operational decisions from now on." A cold wave ran through my veins. "What do you mean? I'm still the CEO of this company." Michael shrugged. "Technically, yes, but the team wants to work with her." Sitting alone in my office, I stared at the whiteboard on the wall. Years ago, I had written our first customer's name on that board. Now, it was covered with Sarah's growth strategies, like my erased past. The real blow came at the family dinner in Napa Valley. We sat around a long dining table in my father's luxurious estate. Grilled salmon, Chardonnay, French cheeses. Yet that night, my stomach had never felt so empty. Sarah took my mother's hand and smiled. Then she raised her glass. "We've decided to take Nextech public. My brother will handle the technical aspects, and I will take over as CEO." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Now that's a real leader," she said. My father put down his knife, looked straight into my eyes and said, "You've always been hardworking, but you've thought too small. Sarah will take this company to the next level." I can never forget that moment. Everyone at the dinner table applauded, except me. In my own home, within my own family, they had looked me straight in the eyes and dethroned me. That night, something broke inside me. One voice told me, "Get up, walk away, let them go." But another voice whispered, "No, if this is their game, then you're going to change the rules." The next morning, when I arrived at the office, my access card didn't work. The secretary handed me a note. "You are on temporary leave. Please consult human resources." That was the day I made my decision. This wasn't just competition anymore. This was war. But I wouldn't fight it with their weapons. I would win with my intelligence. Silently, carefully, patiently. I would let the betrayal grow, and then I would strangle them with it. And to take the first step, I met a man in Brooklyn, our CFO, Michael, but he was no longer Nextech's CFO. He was the architect of my new plan. When I sat with Michael in an old speakeasy bar in Brooklyn, I was gripping my whiskey glass so tightly that it nearly shattered. I had to stay calm. But the only thought running through my mind was, by the time this is over, the name Sarah will be nothing more than a footnote in this industry. Michael watched me carefully. "Are you sure?" he asked. "This is a big move. Your family, investors, the team, they'll all turn against you." I slowly nodded. I gave everything for years. This company wasn't just a business, it was my life. Now, to those who are trying to take it from me, I owe only one thing: justice. We began laying out the plan. Step 1. Establish a new company in Delaware, secretly. The name? NextCore. Because Nextech no longer had a core, they were nothing but a hollow shell. Michael reached out to an old legal advisor. The intellectual property rights of Nextech's software infrastructure were still under my name. Thanks to clauses I had discreetly inserted into the contracts, I owned the algorithms. That meant I had the right to carry over the technical foundation to my new company, unchanged. Step 2. People. But not just anyone. Only those who still had soul. Jake, my first software architect. I met him at a cafe in Palo Alto. As our eyes met, I uttered just one sentence. "Don't sell me out. Don't sell out our story." He bowed his head. "Sarah has no soul," he said. "She speaks well, but she doesn't believe in anything." His hand trembled as he took a sip of his coffee. "I'm in, but this time I'm coding, not making PowerPoint presentations." At night, I moved into a cheap co-working space in Austin. During the day, I didn't exist. I owed no one an explanation. I was reclaiming what was mine, what had been stolen from me. For 3 months, I worked 16 hours a day rebuilding client portfolios. My former sales director ensured that I retained our connection with a major healthcare startup in Miami. The Chicago retail chain was already exhausted by Sarah's endless vision workshops. In the new contracts, I added only one clause: loyalty. NextCore wasn't just an idea anymore. It was a movement, not one of revenge, but of rightful redemption. As I made the final touches, one night I looked out the office window. Rain poured outside, and reflected in the glass was only one thing: determination. That night, I made myself a promise. This story may have begun with a downfall, but it will end with the rise of an empire. On the morning of March 15, 2019, it was only 8:30 a.m. Before Nextech's investor meeting on Sand Hill Road began, I stepped through the glass doors of the building. In my hand was nothing but a USB drive. As I caught my reflection in the elevator mirror, I realized there was little left of the man I used to know. My eyes carried exhaustion, my jaw was clenched with rage, but inside, I was completely calm. Because that day, I wasn't just handing in a resignation. That day, I was wiping the dust off the dream I had built and returning it to its rightful owner. When I opened the conference room door, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Sarah, dressed in a blue suit, was smiling at the investors. My mother watched her proudly, narrowing her eyes in approval, while my father, silent as always, took notes in the corner. The sound of the door made everyone turn. All eyes were on me. Sarah's face tensed. She squinted and looked at me. "What are you doing here?" she asked, trying to mask the strain in her voice. I kept walking. When I reached the end of the table, I slowly placed the USB drive onto the conference table. "I'm resigning," I said, my voice clear and composed. "And this is NextCore's investment portfolio." Some at the table began murmuring. Sarah looked like she wanted to say something, but the words got caught in her throat. They plugged in the USB, and as the documents appeared on the screen, the room fell into stunned silence. Patent applications, transferred client contracts, signed employee commitments, NextCore's commercial strategy, everything was laid out. And most importantly, all contracts responsible for 68% of NextTech's revenue were now officially registered under NextCore. My father shot up from his seat. "What do you think you're doing?" he shouted. But then, Michael spoke. He placed the folder he was holding onto the table, turned to the investors, and said, "Under Delaware law, intellectual property and client contracts belong to the original rights holder. Mr. Alex has transferred these rights to his newly founded company. The only things left of NextTech are its furniture and logo." My mother collapsed into her chair as if the breath had been knocked out of her. Sarah stared blankly into space. Everything they had spent years planning had been shattered in a matter of minutes, but the final blow was reserved for last. Just before I walked out, I turned to Sarah. When our eyes met, I said only one sentence. "You didn't replace me, Sarah. You only became visible when I left the stage." And then I stepped out the door. As I entered the corridor, it felt as though a weight had been lifted off me, like a stone I had carried on my shoulders for years had finally been placed onto the ground. NextCore was no longer just a project. It was the symbol of my freedom. By the end of the day, NextTech was in full panic mode. Investors backed out, clients stopped calling, and the team began falling apart. Every quiet step I had taken had collapsed the empire from within, and for the first time in a long while, I could finally breathe. Just 6 months after NextCore was founded, a headline echoed across TechCrunch's front page. "Bloody family feud in Silicon Valley. NextTech, crushed from within by its own founder." As I read the article, I stared at the screen without blinking. They were telling our story, but they could never understand my emotions. Beneath the lines of that piece lay years of resentment, the sharp sting of betrayal, and the silent fury I had carried with me. This was more than just a corporate battle. This was the revenge of a dream that had been dismissed for years as our little boy's hobby. Sarah remained at the helm of NextTech, but a captain may hold the wheel, yet if the ship is sinking, its fate is inevitable. Investors pulled out rapidly. The largest clients had already signed contracts with NextCore. Sarah's statements as CEO were nothing but PR scripts crafted by a handful of agencies. But when the cameras shut off, NextTech was empty inside. When the third quarter reports were announced, my father didn't call me. He couldn't, because at that moment, I could hear him arguing with my mother at their house. "We've lost control of everything," he muttered angrily, throwing something onto the floor. On my birthday, I found a letter from my father in my mailbox. No envelope, just a folded piece of paper. "Why did you ruin everything?" I read that sentence over and over. Then I slowly crumpled it and tossed it into the trash. That letter showed me one thing. They still hadn't understood anything. I hadn't ruined anything. I had simply reclaimed what was mine, the thing I had built with all my heart, without stealing from anyone, without taking what didn't belong to me, just taking back what I rightfully deserved. NextCore raised $12 million in its Series A funding round. The company culture had reached a balance I could never achieve at NextTech. In team meetings, every voice was heard. Ideas were shared freely. Jake was no longer just coding, he was leading the company's technology strategy. Our CFO, Michael, presented me with an honesty report every Friday, laying everything on the table open and undisguised. This wasn't just a company, it was the place where I regained my self-respect. But deep down, there was still an ache: family. Since that day, I haven't spoken to Sarah. My mother still sends me holiday messages, but she never uses my name. Instead of "How are you?" she writes, "I hope you're doing well." Family bonds, like old lines of code. Sometimes, no matter how much you try to patch them up, they never compile again. Looking back now, I realize I lost much more than just a company. But as a person, I won. I gained my confidence, my determination, and most importantly, I learned my boundaries. Nowadays, when someone says, "Family is everything," I simply nod slightly. Yes, family can be everything, but sometimes that everything is the very thing that destroys you. And sometimes the greatest victory is walking away without saying a word.